Did you really plan to make us pay $1,800 every month? My husband's brother asked, his face clouded with concern. Aiden, visibly flustered, turned to me and asked hesitantly, "Hey, didn't we make extra payments? Is there really still that much debt left?" "In summer and winter, we made slightly larger monthly payments," I replied calmly. "But this is a 35-year mortgage. Even with careful planning, we still have 15 years of payments ahead." Watching the stunned expressions on my brother-in-law and his wife's faces, I silently prayed they would back off. And then my husband said the unthinkable. "I understand. We'll continue paying off the mortgage," he declared. "My name is Tiana, and I'm turning 45 this year. When my only son moved out to start living on his own after entering university, our house, where my husband Aiden and I had lived with him, suddenly felt incredibly spacious. This house is a custom-built home that my husband and I carefully designed. We wanted it to be spacious, so our child could run around freely. To achieve this, we built a 3-story home with a beautiful open-plan design, featuring 5 bedrooms and a soaring atrium. The expansive balcony is where I take pride in growing my collection of herbs, from lavender to chamomile, and if it's edible, I have basil, mint, and rosemary. Various herbs flourish abundantly in my little garden. A refreshing mojito with freshly picked mint is the ultimate treat, and my homemade basil sauce is my son's absolute favorite. I always make sure to bottle it up and sneak it into the cardboard box when sending him care packages. My husband's cherished study has ample workspace and a large shelf perfectly fitted into the ceiling, displaying his beloved collection of books and video games. To fully indulge in the books and games he has gathered there, it is not uncommon for him to spend most of his holidays inside, rarely leaving the study except for meals and the occasional bathroom break. As for me, I enjoy my own hobbies. I tend to my beloved kitchen garden and spend my weekdays catching up on TV dramas and movies in the living room, making the most of my days off. I can't help but think that this is what they call the carefree second phase of life after raising children, as I leisurely enjoy another peaceful holiday today. Both my husband and I work until late in the evenings on weekdays. I contribute to repaying the mortgage for this somewhat extravagant house with my own income. Once our child turned 1, we entrusted him to daycare, allowing me to work shorter hours. By the time he became more independent, I resumed full-time employment as a regular employee. With childcare mostly behind us, my work and my kitchen garden had become the main sources of fulfillment in my life. It was during these tranquil days that a sudden event occurred, shattering the peace we had come to know. My husband sold this house to his older brother, Jacob. At first, I didn't understand what my husband was talking about. "What do you mean?" I asked, confused. "You know my older brother has been living in an apartment all this time, right?" My husband replied with a slightly irritated expression. "It's tough for him with 3 kids close in age in a 2-bedroom house. Now that our son has moved out, I'm thinking of giving this house to my brother," Aiden explained. My husband made such an important decision without consulting me. "Where will we live?" I asked, incredulous. "It's not right to inform me afterward." He furrowed his brows and glared at me. "Don't you know the meaning of helping others? When your family is in trouble, it's normal to lend a helping hand. You're so heartless," he reproached me. I wanted to respect his wish to help a struggling family, but I couldn't accept that he made such a decision without consulting me. Anger began to boil up inside me, but I managed to contain it and calmly express my thoughts to my husband. However, Aiden ultimately silenced me. "Cut it out, just shut up and do what I say," he snapped. From the beginning of our marriage, my husband had a tendency to be domineering, but this was the first time he pushed his opinions onto me to this extent. Moreover, his brother and my sister-in-law often relied on us for various things. 3 years ago, Jacob and his wife, who frequently visited our home, said, "Since you only have 1 child and he's already grown up, could you take care of our kids a bit? We have 3 elementary school children." They left their children at our place and went out together. It was up to me and my son to take care of the 3 kids. They always found excuses to leave their children with us and enjoy themselves without a care. "We have plenty of space here. Feel free to rely on us anytime," my husband would say, putting on a good face to please my in-laws. But he never took care of the children, and instead locked himself in his study. He even installed an inner lock so they couldn't come in. Moreover, the nephews we were looking after had no sense of reservation. "We're tired of Grandma's cooking. We want to eat out. I want a hamburger," they said. Mom and Dad said that Tiana and the others are all really kind and will grant any of our requests. Considering their parents, it's no wonder these kids turned out this way. No matter how many times I consulted my husband, he never listened to my opinion. Even my son, who was in high school at that time, grew tired of every weekend. After discussing it together, my son took on a part-time job, and I also found work, finding various reasons to refuse taking care of the nephews. My husband, who had plenty of free time, didn't want to take care of them alone either, so he managed to convince his brother and refused. Since then, we had grown distant from my brother-in-law and his wife, so you can imagine my shock when they abruptly decided the house should go to my husband's brother. It felt like the ground had been pulled out from under me. My brother-in-law and his wife showed up at our house, pretending it was just to take a look around. My nephews, now middle schoolers, were with them, but their behavior was exactly the same. They barged into the room they assumed would be theirs and started causing their usual commotion. "You're moving? Well, with just the two of you, this house must feel too big. Don't worry, we'll take good care of it," Jacob said with a smug look. Until yesterday, I had no clue they were planning to move, but my brother-in-law seemed completely unfazed. Meanwhile, my sister-in-law stood confidently in the kitchen. "Before you leave, make sure to hire a proper cleaning service. We wouldn't want to deal with any mess you leave behind," she remarked bluntly. How shameless of her. I was completely fed up with my sister-in-law, who clearly emitted an aura of wanting us to leave as soon as possible. Even when I suddenly mentioned that the mortgage hadn't been fully paid off, my brother-in-law smiled confidently. "Don't worry," he said. "Our oldest child will be in high school next year, and my wife will start working part-time. We need her to contribute to the finances. Leave it to me, I'll work hard." Watching this exchange between the couple, I couldn't help but wonder if they were completely misunderstanding something. Since the beginning, it had been me who paid off the mortgage for this house. The monthly payment was $1,800. Could my brother-in-law and his wife handle such payments? I am a pharmacist, so I have a decent income, but it's still a significant amount. On the other hand, I heard from my husband that Jacob's take-home pay was only around $2,000. There's no way they can make ends meet with just a $200 difference. My brother-in-law and his wife seem to have the misconception that my job as a pharmacy clerk pays poorly and that the mortgage repayment is not a significant amount. "You work at the pharmacy, right? The name sounds so cool," Jacob's wife said cheerfully. "I'm also taking a correspondence course to get a medical office qualification. Once I pass, I'll return to work and rejoin society," she added. They are an optimistic couple no matter what. Aiden has always had a strong sense of pride and has felt inferior to me, who earned significantly more income than him. To avoid revealing such a difference in income, my husband explained to others about my job, saying it was something like working at the pharmacy. Well, that's beside the point. It seems my brother-in-law and his wife believe that if they both work, they can handle the mortgage payments. With such thoughts in mind, Jacob suddenly asked a question. "By the way, how much is the monthly mortgage payment?" My husband's face, which had been smiling until then, stiffened. Apparently, even Aiden wasn't aware of the exact monthly payment amount. "It's $1,800, I said without hesitation. Both my husband and his brother froze for a moment. $1,800? Are you kidding?" my sister-in-law exclaimed, his tone filled with disbelief. "No, it's not a lie. Since we bought the house without a down payment, including a land cost, we pay $1,800 every month," I explained. "We can't afford that amount," my sister-in-law continued, her voice rising in shock. I couldn't help but agree with her, and silently hoped this whole matter would be called off as soon as possible. My brother-in-law, caught off guard by the amount, turned to my husband. "Did you really intend to make us pay this amount every month?" he asked, his expression full of concern. My husband hurriedly asked me hesitantly, "Hey, didn't we make extra repayments? Is there still that much remaining debt?" We made slightly higher monthly repayments during summer and winter, I explained calmly. It's a 35-year mortgage, and even with proper calculations, we still have 15 years worth of repayments left. As I observed the stunned expression of my brother-in-law's couple, I silently prayed for them to quickly back down. But then Aiden said something outrageous. I understand. We will continue to pay the mortgage, he concluded. This time it was my turn to be shocked. My brother-in-law's couple burst with joy at this unexpected turn of events. What a generous person. He's got a big heart, my sister-in-law gushed, looking at my husband with admiration. My husband, basking in their praise, smiled proudly. I couldn't help but raise my voice in protest. What are you thinking? Why do we have to go to such lengths? But my husband silenced me with his usual words. It's only natural to help family when they're in trouble. Why are you so heartless? He replied in bewilderment. I was speechless with exasperation, completely out of patience with my husband's shallow need to always make himself look good. Beyond Aiden's proposal, his brother's couple regained their energy, and the house tour of our home resumed. We want to move in by the beginning of next month, my sister-in-law announced. So we'll need you to take care of the procedures, arrangement for the move, and everything else. My husband handed me all the responsibilities, leaving me infuriated beyond measure. That night I called my son, who lives alone. I explained our current situation and told him I couldn't stay silent anymore. On the other end of the phone, my son chuckled as if he found it amusing. I'm glad you finally feel like fighting back. You've been patient all this time, so give them a taste of their own medicine, even if it leads to a divorce. Mom, you have the strength to live on your own, my son concluded. Encouraged by his reassuring words, I made up my mind to stand up to my in-laws and husband, who were acting as they pleased. Shortly after deciding to hand over our home to my brother-in-law's family, I contacted the bank where we had the mortgage contract. In fact, since this issue came up, I had been independently researching changing the mortgage ownership. What I found out was that changing the ownership of a housing loan is generally not allowed. Even if it is possible, it's usually between spouses or parents and children. This was a slightly complicated situation involving relatives. Moreover, the owner of the property is me. It's possible to hide the relationship and change the ownership. But if the financial institution finds out, it could be considered a serious breach of contract, and in the worst case, they could demand full repayment of the loan. Both Aiden's brother and his wife, along with my husband, who had casually promised to hand over our home to them, didn't realize that transferring ownership was a high-risk endeavor. Until the day of the handover, I decided not to do anything and focused on my work and household chores. Of course, my husband was furious when he saw that. Hey, hurry up and pick a moving company or something. If you keep dragging your feet, it'll be next month before we know it, he snapped. I'm busy with work. Can't you handle it? Besides, if we're giving up the house, we also need to figure out where we're going next. What's the plan for that? I asked calmly. You should be the one handling that, he shot back. That's exactly why I'm saying I'm busy, I replied firmly. Ignoring my husband, who sat there pouting in silence, I headed to work. As I kept up with my daily routine, it seemed my husband had taken matters into his own hands. A large number of boxes started showing up at the house, so he must have hired a moving company. Look, I've already set up the move and the contract for the new apartment will be finalized soon. Stop sulking and start packing, he said, sounding impatient. But no matter what he said, I refused to start preparing. Day after day, we had the same arguments, with my husband always angrily blaming and criticizing me. Enough already! Stop being so selfish, he snapped. If you keep this up, I have my own thoughts too. I'm getting a divorce. Is that what you want? I ignored him, calmly watching TV. Hurry up and pack your things. We're getting a divorce, he yelled again. I stood up, still calm, and replied, I don't want to be with you anymore either. Let's get a divorce. With that, I headed to the bedroom, unfazed. My resolute attitude left my husband stunned and silent. I'm sorry, he muttered. I don't want a divorce. I want to be with you forever. His tearful apology surprised me slightly. All right, I understand, I said firmly. But we're not moving out of this house, and we're not changing the ownership. Let's stay here and live together forever. Though he acknowledged my feelings, he sighed. That's not possible. We've already promised my brother and his wife, and it's too late to change anything now, Aiden added dejectedly. It'll be fine, I replied, lightly tapping my husband, who looked defeated. The day of the promised handover arrived. My brother-in-law and his wife showed up, their belongings packed into a borrowed pickup truck. Since it was a weekday, their children were at school. Finally, it's our new home, Jacob uttered excitedly. It's amazing we don't have to repay any loans, his wife added. Standing tall as they prepared to enter the house, I spoke up. I'm sorry, but unless you agree to these conditions, I can't hand over the house, I remarked firmly. Holding the home loan contract in my hand, I continued. Changing the loan ownership is generally impossible. If you truly want to live here, I request you repay the remaining loan amount in a lump sum. My brother-in-law hesitated, but his wife was furious. Who do you think you are? She snapped. Just leave this place already. I showed her the loan contract again. It's only natural for me to speak up. I am the homeowner here, I said, pointing to my name on the document. Her eyes widened in shock. My husband has no rights here. As the homeowner, I refuse to hand over this house. Please take your belongings and leave immediately. If you cause any more disturbance, I will call the police, I added as a warning. What? Just because you're making good money, don't act so high and mighty, she retorted. Don't you think you should share those benefits with your family? You're truly heartless. It's a pointless conversation, I thought, shaking my head. I don't mind being called heartless. Instead of relying on us for everything, try handling things on your own. Be a role model for your children, I replied. With those words, I turned and entered the house, firmly locking the door behind me. My brother-in-law and his wife made a scene outside for a while, but eventually they left, drawing suspicious glances from the neighbors. Shortly after, my husband received a call from his brother. We've already moved out of our apartment. Please, let us stay temporarily until we find a new place, he begged tearfully. My husband quietly responded, no. I couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity of the situation. I knew that if they moved in, they would never leave. Even after all that, my brother-in-law continued calling daily, and sometimes his wife would call me in tears. But my husband stayed firm. I feel bad for them, Aiden admitted. They don't have the money to rent a new place, and the kids will suffer. Seizing the opportunity, I suggested, why not let them live in the apartment you were planning to rent? That's a good idea, he said with a smile, calling his brother to make the offer. Eventually, my brother-in-law and his family moved into the apartment, but soon my husband faced another problem. They're not paying the rent, he lamented. Aaron transferred the rent once, but I've been covering it for months now. As expected, they took advantage of him. I had anticipated this outcome from the start. How naive and self-righteous I was, I thought with a sneer. Their family is going through a tough time, so we should help them, right? You're not a heartless person like me, are you? I teased my husband. He had no response. My brother-in-law's family, unable to afford the rent, now lives in a cramped one-bedroom apartment, much smaller than before. It's unfortunate for their 3 growing boys, but perhaps it's the consequence of their selfishness. I won't sympathize with them, I thought, and I certainly have no intention of helping them. Though they continue to demand money like hyenas, my husband now shoulders a huge debt because of them. Thankfully, we kept our finances separate. As for me, I'll leave their pitiful fate behind and focus on my own life. Next month, I'll harvest the basil I've been growing for my son, who will be coming home.